Today, we slip back into the smoke-choked libraries of Renaissance Europe, a world where ink was as dangerous as gunpowder, and a book could condemn its author to fire. In one forgotten chest, bound in casket and silence, lay a volume unlike any other. Its pages teemed with impossible plants, star charts that defied the heavens, and naked figures dissolving into emerald pools. Its text flowed with the precision of language, yet no tongue on earth could claim it. When Wilfred Voynich pried it from a Jesuit trunk in 1912, he believed he had uncovered a treasure. Instead, he had awakened a phantom. Codebreakers failed. Scholars unraveled. The book refused to yield, whispering to each new reader the same taunt. You are not meant to understand. For centuries, it has sat like a riddle carved in skin, mocking kings and computers alike. And even now, 600 years later, the question remains inked across its pages, more haunting than any signature. Who wrote the Voynich Manuscript and why? A book that speaks in tongues, yet no one alive or dead can tell you what it says. Imagine flipping through parchment pages filled with plants that never grew on Earth, recipes that prescribe ingredients no apothecary ever stocked, and naked women bathing in green liquid, as if they're soaking in the veins of the planet itself. Every drawing is wrong, every word is unreadable, and yet the text flows like a symphony, line after line, page after page, as though written by a hand that was absolutely certain of its own logic. Here's the unsettling part. It looks like language. It has grammar, patterns, repetition. But not one single person, not the British codebreakers who cracked the Nazis' enigma, not the best AI of our time, not the most obsessive cryptographers locked in caffeine-fueled mania, has ever extracted meaning from it. Nothing. It laughs at us across centuries, a paper specter taunting every set of eyes that dare stare too long. Picture it lying on a library table in near silence, its vellum pages smelling faintly of animal skin and dust, illuminated under some nervous grad student's fluorescent lamp. The longer you stare, the more hostile it feels. You begin to sense the book isn't meant to be read. It's meant to consume, like some parasitic mirror, reflecting your ignorance back at you. The more you demand answers, the more it whispers. You are not meant to know, and yet it exists. Physical, real, leather binding, carefully inked illustrations, carbon dated to the early 15th century. Someone, somewhere, spent years, maybe decades, making this thing, which means there was a purpose, some secret, buried so deep inside its pages that 600 years later, we're still clawing at the margins, begging for a single thread of clarity. The Voynich Manuscript, the world's most unreadable book, the riddle that devoured scholars, the literary corpse that refuses autopsy. If it was a prank, it's the cruelest in history. If it's a code, it's perfect. And if it's knowledge, then humanity is staring at wisdom meant for someone else. Europe in the early 1400s was not a continent of certainty, but a plague-haunted shadows and hungry fires. Imagine streets filled with the echo of church bells tolling for the dead, the scent of burning tallow, the wet rot of unwashed bodies pressed into narrow alleys. This was a world where books were not common objects. They were power, hoarded by monasteries and princes, chained to desks as if they might crawl away in the night. A single manuscript could change a man's fortune, elevate a noble's prestige, or brand an author's heretic and set his skin aflame at the stake. And yet, despite the chaos, the 15th century was a period of furious ambition. Scholars whisper of alchemy, of philosopher's stones that could cure death itself. Physicians wrote elaborate treatises, half magic and half medicine, about the balance of humors and celestial influences. Astronomers peered upward, charting the heavens with trembling fingers, hoping to snatch patterns from the stars before their sight was clouded by smoke from the next village pyre. This was also the dawn of obsession with secret knowledge. Notebooks filled with strange ciphers circulated among learned men. Systems of symbols, private alphabets, codes that guard experiments from prying eyes or from the Inquisition's wrath. Language itself was weaponized, twisted into labyrinths that promised only the initiated could find their way back out. Knowledge was dangerous, and concealment was survival. Against this backdrop, the Voynich Manuscript does not seem like an alien artifact dropped into mud of history. It seems terrifyingly plausible. A creation born of feverish intellect who believed their thoughts too volatile, too incendiary, to be left exposed in common script. Its vellum pages, made from the skins of over 100 animals, suggest wealth, dedication, obsession. This wasn't the scribble of a madman in a garret. This was a project that consumed time, resources, life itself. The libraries of the age were filled with volumes that blurred the line between science and sorcery, but nothing else from that century or any century matches the sheer alien coherence of this book. Herbal guides existed, yes, but their plants were real. Astrology charts existed, but their stars had names. Medical diagrams existed, but their women didn't bathe in emerald pools, as if dissolving into some cosmic womb. It is as if the author of the Voynich Manuscript lived in our world only by accident, recording knowledge from a place the rest of us were never invited to see. And while Europe prayed, burned, and bled, somewhere, hidden away from prying eyes, a hand scratched out a script that was destined to mock every human attempt at understanding for the next 6 centuries. The Voynich Manuscript is less an object than a presence. When you describe it plainly, it sounds almost mundane, a bound book of roughly 240 vellum pages, filled with strange drawings and an unknown script. But to sit before it, in the rarefied quiet of Yale's Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library, is to confront a paradox carved into parchment. The script flows left to right, curving and looping like it belongs to a language. It repeats shapes, prefixes, suffixes, patterns familiar to every linguist. And yet it belongs to no known tongue. Not Latin, not Greek, not Arabic, not any of the secret alphabets that alchemists invented in their paranoia. It is a ghost language, consistent, structured, and yet semantically void. Every attempt to translate it collapses into nonsense. Then come the illustrations. Botanicals, hundreds of them, with roots, stems, and leaves arranged as though they should be recognized, but they aren't. They look like nature drawn from memory by someone who has never seen it. Plants assembled from fragments of dreams. Astronomical charts spiral across pages, crowded with stars, moons, and impossible zodiacs. In another section, naked women tumble through aqueduct-like tubes, soaking in green-blue pools that resemble viscera more than water. Recipes appear in the final portion. Lists of instructions written in the same unknowable script, as if someone meant for us to follow them, but left us with the cruelest of instruction manuals. Even the materials whisper contradictions. Radiocarbon dating places a vellum between 1404 and 1438. The pigments match dyes common to the Renaissance. Everything is authentic, no cheap modern hoax. And yet the book emerges into history only in 1912, when an antiquarian named Wilfred Voynich claimed to have found it in a Jesuit library in Italy. For nearly 500 years before that, the manuscript lived in shadows, surfacing occasionally in the letters of desperate collectors or in the hands of emperors who threw their finest cryptographers against it, always without success. The subject of our investigation, then, is not merely a book, but a kind of intellectual parasite. Scholars are drawn to it like moths, only to burn themselves against its opaque flame. The manuscript has broken codebreakers, obsessed professors into madness, spawned conspiracies of aliens, witches, and time travelers. Some believe it contains lost herbal medicine. Others whisper it's an elaborate hoax designed to bankrupt kings. Still others wonder if it was written for no one at all, an act of pure artistic spite against the very concept of comprehension. And yet here it is, real, physical, surviving against all odds. a relic from a mind we cannot access. The Voynich Manuscript doesn't just exist. It endures. It dares us to stare longer, think harder, lose ourselves deeper. And many have. Too many. The book lay dormant for centuries, shuffling between owners like a cursed heirloom nobody could quite throw away. A letter from 1665 reveals one of its earliest disruptions. A Jesuit scholar, desperate to please Emperor Rudolph II of the Holy Roman Empire, offered him a manuscript with a claim that it was a work of Roger Bacon, the English friar who dabbled in optics, alchemy, and heretical science. The emperor, notoriously obsessed with the occult, supposedly paid a fortune in gold for it. Imagine it. A monarch bankrupted by a book that never spoke. But the disturbance that truly shattered the manuscript's anonymity arrived in 1912, when Wilfrid Voynich, a Polish book dealer with a taste for the rare and exotic, claimed to discover it in a trunk at the Villa Mondragone, a crumbling Jesuit college near Rome. He pulled it out into the light of the 20th century, and suddenly this medieval puzzle became a modern obsession. Voynich, with his keen instinct for mystery, immediately declared Unsolved, uncracked, uncrackable. He had stumbled upon the literary equivalent of a corpse with no name, no murder weapon, and no clear crime. Just a body that shouldn't exist. Scholars swarmed. Linguists thought they could decode it in a month. Cryptographers sharpened their pencils, convinced it was a medieval cipher awaiting their genius. Instead, they found themselves staring into linguistic static, words that repeated with unnatural frequency, patterns that hinted at meaning, but dissolved the moment anyone tried to pin them down. It behaved like language without being language, like an echo of thought rather than thought itself. The illustrations were no less maddening. Every botanist who opened the book walked away muttering. No plant matched any known species. They had the structure of plants, roots, stems, flowers, but not the identity. As if someone had tried to reconstruct Earth's flora based on vague, second-hand descriptions. The astrological charts offered no comfort either. They showed stars, moons, zodiac wheels, but the constellations refused to align with the night sky above our planet. This was the first disturbance. The recognition that the Voynich Manuscript was not simply unreadable, but deliberately untethered. A book that looks like it should yield knowledge, yet slips away at every grasp. It was not nonsense. It was too consistent for that. But it was not sense either. Scholars began to whisper about forgery, alien scripts, lost civilizations. One thing was certain. This book was not harmless parchment. It was an infection, spreading doubt, obsession, and paranoia into every mind that touched it. Wilfrid Voynich had expected to sell the manuscript for profit. Instead, he unleashed a century-long intellectual haunting. The manuscript was no longer a collector's oddity. It was a riddle that refused to be ignored, a text that had no business existing in a world where every word must have a meaning. You'd think by now someone would have cracked it. If not a medieval monk, then surely a modern codebreaker. After all, humanity split the atom, mapped the genome, walked on the moon. But the Voynich Manuscript has outlasted them all, grinning silently while geniuses collapse at its feet. World War II brought the sharpest minds in cryptography into the fray. These were the men who disassembled the Nazis' Enigma machine, who bent entire languages into puzzles and then unraveled them again before breakfast. If anyone could crack the manuscript, surely it was them. But when these war-forged codebreakers turned their hungry eyes to its pages, something strange happened. The patterns looked solvable, yet dissolved under pressure. It was like trying to hold smoke in your hands. After months of analysis, they walked away defeated, muttering that the book was either genius beyond comprehension or nonsense too perfect to distinguish from genius. And that's where the paranoia started to set in, because nonsense usually reveals itself. Random gibberish doesn't mimic grammar, doesn't produce statistical consistencies that resemble actual language, but the Voynich text does. It repeats certain words. It avoids impossible letter combinations. It even shows curious rules about which symbols follow others. In short, it behaves like a real language, just one no one has ever spoken. Even computers join the hunt. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, scientists unleashed algorithms, neural networks, and statistical models on the manuscript. The results? Maddening contradictions. Some analyses insisted it's definitely a cipher hiding a European language. Others spat out probabilities pointing toward Hebrew, Turkish, or even an early form of Latin. A few claimed to find patterns resembling East Asian languages, and then other equally rigorous studies declared it a meaningless hoax, cleverly structured to dupe the gullible. The illustrations deepened the wound. Herbalists saw impossible hybrids, plants with the leaves of one species and the roots of another. Astronomers couldn't reconcile the star charts with any known constellations. Medical historians scratched their heads at naked women bathing in what looked like organs or veins. And every so often, someone would claim a breakthrough. This plant matches a sunflower. This diagram aligns with the Pleiades. But the supposed clues always fell apart under scrutiny, leaving nothing but exhaustion in their wake. The mystery metastasized. Was an elaborate Renaissance prank, a cosmic joke that had somehow outlived its laughter? Or was it a vessel of hidden knowledge, locked away for reasons humanity was never meant to uncover? Every attempted explanation created more questions. Every confident theory eventually collapsed into doubt. The manuscript seemed to play a cruel game, dangling meaning like a lure, only to yank it away the moment you reach for it. And so the book grew in legend, less an artifact of parchment and ink than a psychological trap, a labyrinth that devoured reason and spat out obsession. 600 years, and nowhere found the exit. The investigation into the Voynich Manuscript reads less like scholarship and more like an asylum roll call. Each generation of thinkers approaches the book with swaggering certainty, only to leave shattered, humiliated, or clinging to a pet theory like a tattered blanket. Take William Friedman, America's greatest cryptographer, the man who practically invented modern code-breaking. He and his wife Elizabeth, equally brilliant, spent years dissecting the manuscript. They cataloged symbols, crunched frequencies, tested ciphers. If there were two people alive who could drag meaning out of this book, it was them. And yet, after decades, Friedman admitted defeat. His final notes described the text as an artificial language, a system made to look real but with no underlying meaning. Imagine dedicating your life to words, only to confront a book that sneers, "I am language without soul." But others weren't convinced by the hoax theory. Gordon Rugg, a cognitive scientist, proposed a manuscript was generated with a simple grid system, a medieval equivalent of a random text generator. He argued it could be created without genius, just patience and trickery. But critics pushed back. If it was a hoax, why the consistency? Why the decades of effort? Why not leave evidence of sloppiness? A hoax this airtight almost demands more brilliance than an actual language. Other theories veered into the bizarre. Some insisted it was an unknown dialect, perhaps an extinct Romance language encrypted phonetically. Others suggested it was shorthand for a European tongue, a code meant for a small circle of scholars. More imaginative minds claimed it was a book of alchemy, of secret herbal medicine, of women's health knowledge hidden from the prying eyes of church and state. And then came the wildfires of speculation: alien artifact, Atlantean relic, time traveler's diary, a message encoded for intelligences not yet evolved. It became less an academic question than a mirror of humanity's anxieties. The manuscript could be anything, so people projected onto it whatever they most feared or most desired. Even artificial intelligence joined the interrogation. In 2018, Canadian computer scientists ran machine learning models on the text and confidently announced it was likely Hebrew, disguised as an unknown cipher. For a few days, the world buzzed with excitement. And then, silence. The translation amounted to little more than garbled phrases. She made recommendations to the priest. Sentences that sounded meaningful but collapsed into absurdity upon inspection. This is the cruel genius of the Voynich Manuscript. It gives you just enough pattern to believe a solution is close, then pulls you into a swamp of contradictions. Every investigator walks away either broken or delusional. A book that looks like it must yield, but never has. A book that creates more theories than answers, as though it were designed to breed obsession. There is always a moment in stories like this when the pursuit of truth tips into mania, when the line between scholarship and madness dissolves. For the Voynich Manuscript, that breaking point has happened again and again, like a curse that resets itself with each new generation of readers. Wilfrid Voynich himself never saw his treasure cracked. He died in 1930, still convinced he had unearthed the secret writings of Roger Bacon, still clinging to the idea that the manuscript was priceless not for its mystery, but for its knowledge. His obsession consumed his finances, his reputation, even his health. And when he died, the book remained just as silent as the day he found it. Decades later, Yale librarians have reported the same thing. Scholars sitting in the reading room, staring for hours, days, until their eyes grow bloodshot. Some whisper to the staff that they've almost got it. Others leave abruptly, abandoning their notes, as if they've glimpsed something too dangerous to articulate. The book inspires hope and then annihilates it, like a siren luring ships toward rocks. Even professional codebreakers have cracked under its spell. In the 1940s, William Friedman, after a lifetime of decoding some of the most complex ciphers in history, wrote to a colleague that the manuscript might represent an uncrackable cipher, a structure deliberately designed to simulate meaning, without actually containing it. Imagine the most brilliant cryptographer in the world essentially admitting, "It broke me. It's unbeatable." And then there are the breakdowns of logic itself. In the 1960s, a psychiatrist named Leo Levitov published a translation claiming the book was a Cathar ritual manual from medieval France. His evidence? Almost nothing. The text he produced read like a parody, filled with wild leaps of imagination. But he wasn't alone. Other amateur translators began popping up, each announcing finally, "I've done it," always with absolute certainty, always with flimsy proof, and always inevitably debunked. This endless cycle of breakthroughs and humiliations is a manuscript's most diabolical feature. It doesn't merely resist interpretation. It actively corrodes the sanity of those who dare to wrestle with it. Like a linguistic black hole, it swallows reason and spits out delusion. And perhaps the most chilling thought is this: maybe that's not a side effect. Maybe that's the point. Maybe the manuscript was created not to be read but to infect, to lure minds into its labyrinth and watch them collapse. A book that does not exist for knowledge, but for punishment. Here is the cruel truth. There is no resolution. 6 centuries of staring, prodding, analyzing, digitizing, decoding, and the Voynich Manuscript remains mute. It has resisted monks and emperors, geniuses and computers. It laughs at us still, its silence louder than scream. Officially, scholars sit on a fence sharp enough to bleed from both sides. Some accept William Friedman's conclusion that it's an artificial language, a system designed to look real but devoid of meaning, a brilliantly constructed illusion. Others argue for the lost language theory, that it's a tongue spoken by a tiny medieval community, now extinct, its grammar and vocabulary swallowed whole by history. Still others cling to more radical notions, that it hides alchemical recipes, medical lore, or mystical secrets too dangerous for public eyes. But every resolution unravels under scrutiny. If it's a hoax, why spend years painting plans with meticulous detail, constructing pages of coherent structure? If it's a lost language, Why no trace of it anywhere else in the medieval record? If it's knowledge, why encode in a way that guarantees no one can use it? Each theory collapses in on itself like a dying star. The lingering questions gnaw at the edges of reason. Who wrote it? Why? Was it meant for human eyes? Or was the act of writing itself the end goal? Was it a prayer, a curse, a game, or a diary of visions that could not be expressed in ordinary script? The possibility that chills most deeply is also the simplest, that the book is not hiding meaning at all, that its meaninglessness is the message. A text that proves not all mysteries yield to reason, that knowledge has limits, that humanity's hunger for understanding will never be fully satisfied. And so the manuscript remains in its glass coffin at Yale, surrounded by scanners and climate controls, preserved as if it were a dangerous relic rather than parchment and ink. Scholars still peer at its pages. Computers still crunch its patterns. Amateurs still declare victories on obscure forums, only to be debunked within weeks. The cycle repeats endlessly. The Voynich Manuscript is not solved, and perhaps it never will be. It sits at the edge of human comprehension, a mocking reminder that some doors, once closed, are not meant to open. The Voynich Manuscript is not just an artifact. It's a cultural virus. It infects every era it touches, reshaping itself to reflect our obsessions. In the 17th century, it was thought to be a friar's secret alchemy. In the Age of Enlightenment, a cipher hiding forbidden science. During the Cold War, it became a potential code of spies. Today, it drifts online as clickbait headlines, AI fodder, and conspiracy fuel. The book refuses to die because it doesn't have to. It feeds on our hunger for answers. It has shaped disciplines, too. Modern cryptography sharpened its teeth on this manuscript. Whole branches of computational linguistics owe their origins to failed attempts at decoding it. The sheer act of failing against the Voynich has produced breakthroughs elsewhere, spin-offs in code breaking, pattern recognition, even machine learning. It's as if the manuscript, like a trickster mentor, educates humanity not by teaching us what it means, but by forcing us to invent new tools just to keep wrestling with it. But its psychological footprint is the most telling. The manuscript is a mirror. Rationalists see a hoax. Mystics see secret knowledge. Conspiracy theorists see aliens. Historians see lost culture. It reflects the biases of whoever stares at it, turning obsession into revelation, revelation into madness. The book itself becomes a test. How much ambiguity can you tolerate before you break? It has slipped into pop culture like a shadow. Novels use it as a plot device. Video games hide it as an Easter egg. Television documentaries tease it with ominous music. The Voynich has become shorthand for unsolvable mystery, an icon of the unknowable, like Atlantis, the pyramids, or the Zodiac killer's final cipher. It lingers in our collective imagination, not because of what it says, but because of what it withholds. And in this withholding, it has achieved a kind of immortality. Unlike most medieval texts forgotten, crumbling in monastic archives, the Voynich lives. People pilgrimage to Yale just to glimpse it, as though standing before its glass case will somehow transmit the secret. Scholars still request access, still write papers, still chase ghosts in its pages. The manuscript does nothing, and yet it continues to command reverence. It is the perfect relic for a species addicted to meaning, a book that may never give us what we want, but guarantees we will never stop asking. The most disturbing thing about the Voynich Manuscript is not its refusal to be read, but what that refusal says about us. We cannot abide silence. We demand meaning, even where none exists. We would rather hallucinate answers, aliens, witches, ancient cults, than admit defeat. The manuscript is a mirror, and when we stare into its pages, what looks back is our own desperation, dressed up as scholarship. It's easy to laugh at the amateur translators and conspiracy theorists, but are they so different from the rest of us? Entire generations of codebreakers, men and women who faced down the secrets of empires, collapsed before this book. Computers that can beat grandmasters at chess, diagnose cancers, and generate human-sounding language still hiccup and choke on these pages. The manuscript has defeated us not by complexity, but by sheer indifference. It doesn't fight back. It simply sits there, blank-eyed, daring us to keep clawing at its skin. And here's the thought that should keep you up at night. Maybe the book was never meant to be understood at all. Maybe it's not a cipher, not a lost language, not a hoax, but an experiment, a demonstration of how fragile the human mind is when confronted with the unknowable. A book not about herbs or stars, but about us, our vanity, our need for answers, our inability to accept that some mysteries are eternal. Imagine a monk in the 15th century, dipping his quill in ink, not to record knowledge but construct a trap, a text designed to echo language without being language, a perpetual snare that would devour minds centuries after his bones turned to dust. In that sense, the manuscript has succeeded beyond all measure. It has made us part of its story. Every failed translation, every broken cryptographer, every sleepless night staring at glyphs that won't yield, that is the book's meaning. And maybe that's a true horror. Not that the Voynich Manuscript contains a secret we cannot crack, but that its secret is already out in the open, that the mystery is the point, that the pages laugh at us across 600 years, whispering the one truth we cannot bear to face. Some things are not meant to be known. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for listening. As usual, please leave any comments or feedback you may have, and I hope to see you all again in the next case.